welcome back to this installment of the Voices in Cloth series. I am so excited to meet this lady. We have chatted for a long while on WhatsApp and Facebook. Angie Weisswanger, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, John. It's lovely
Now
to
I
see
know
you.
you're lying because,
No,
come
I'm
on,
not.
raise it up.
I broke it. I fell in the road. I was trying to rescue a snake. No good deed goes unpunished, as you know.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, can we raise that back up and you talk and show everybody what you did?
Well, I wanted to cover it in cloth because it got grubby and I don't like grubby things. And I couldn't cut the cloth, so I had to use a serviette and decoupage the serviette because that was a lot easier. You just paint it with a water brush and then it just comes apart, which is wonderful.
Yeah. It looks amazing. I can see kids wanting Barbies and all things like that on them. So, but Angie, you started.
I could start a business.
I was going to say you started a new business, a bespoke niche in the market. Angie, for some people who don't know you, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Right. I live in Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth, as it used to be known. And I've grown up here. I've lived here all my life, except 5 years in Cape Town. And that's when I actually started quilting in 1979 when I was a student and I needed money. So I started making patchwork cushions. Quilted ones. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And you know, I'd been inspired because at school we had the most dreadful sewing. The nuns, I was at a Catholic school, so the nuns made us do things like grey pleated skirts by hand with zips. Dreadful, not inspiring at all. And one day, our maths teacher, who happened to be a Scottish Jesuit priest, showed us a quilt his mother had made for him. Well, I'd never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And my jaw hit the ground and I thought, now that's something worth sewing. So then I started looking at all the magazines that were coming out, you know, the family magazine, etc. And whenever there was a quilt, immediately I focused on that. So it was my go-to as a student because there was, I was at UCT in Cape Town and there was a clothing factory down the road and they used to put these bags of fabric scraps on the pavement for free. So it was an ancient hand singer and away I went.
But that's how quilting started.
Yeah.
In the 1800s or even before, because I think the first quilting sample of quilting was found in Japan in like 500 AD. And what they did was for the firefighters.
Fabulous.
And it was
for insulation.
They would do layers of the cloth to protect the firefighters who went in to protect it.
Gosh, how clever.
Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah, the Japanese are always ahead of everybody with everything, aren't they? Amazing. Right. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, and you know, as a student, I didn't have money and a friend got married. So my boyfriend at the time bought a cheap blanket and I stitched patchwork on top and a sheet underneath. And that was my first quilt. I didn't know about binding in those days.
That is very special. Yeah. So what's your best part of the quilting process?
The binding. I love hand stitching binding.
Really?
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't like the binding.
Finishing off of a quilt. You know, it doesn't look finished until it's bound. And also the color. I mean, I'm a color freak, which is why all my quilts are very, very, very bunt. So yeah, I love color. Yeah.
So what is your favorite quilt that you've made?
Gosh, it's a difficult one because I love collaborative quilts. I love working with groups, but I think the one I'm most proud of, maybe, I made for a friend who's an extreme adventurer to commemorate his rowing from Cape Town to Rio. Yeah, he and a friend rowed a little boat from Cape Town to Rio.
Wow.
To highlight climate change. And he has a campaign called Do One Thing for the planet. And so I did a dot quilt. I'll send you a photograph of it. I'm very proud of that quilt. And it was actually on the festival in 2017 and it got a second prize. So I'm very proud of it.
Wow.
Yeah. That's for an art quilt. Yeah, because I love art quilts. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And are you going to be at festival in Pietermaritzburg?
I am. And it's the first festival I'm not teaching. I was debating going or not going, and then I thought, okay, I've got quilts on the exhibition. I've got a teacher's quilt. I've got your little miniature, and then I had 2 art quilts I was busy with, but now I can't send them in. So I'm sending in just a plain old quilt I made for my husband. And then I thought,
I'm pretty sure. When does that cast come off?
it comes off in 6 weeks' time.
So what's that?
That's sort of middle to end of May. So I won't get it done because
I'm pretty sure. Oh, okay,
hand
yeah.
done. And I've also got the tape exhibition I'm busy working for with 2 big collaborative pieces. So no, I have to be realistic, but I'm just so grateful that I will get to a festival where I'll have time to actually see the quilts, because the last 3 festivals I've been at, I've been teaching almost all the time. So I haven't had a chance to actually view the quilts the way I'd like to view quilts, where I sit and look at them. So I'm very, very pleased about that. And I'll get to meet John Cole Morgan.
No, you will have a gin and
friend.
tonic with John Cole Morgan.
And I'm going to see my dearest friend, Pam Stallebras, who's my greatest inspiration.
Sorry?
Pam Stallebras.
Pam Stallebras is she is my, and I'm going to get annihilated by saying this because I love all South African quilters, but Pam is my favorite South African quilter. She is the most inspiring woman, and her work, I tell you, she came to Festival Quilts in the UK about 2 years before COVID, maybe it was a year before COVID, and she had a piece on the wall and she wanted £1,000 for it, and I tell you, I back and forth. It was the most stunning piece of work. I will always
was that her cyanotype one?
It was all indigo colors that she put.
Yes, it was cyanotypes. Oh, fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Amazing. And I tell you, it's my dream to be able to go and work with her one-to-one.
Yeah.
And the
last I've been so lucky as to do that.
Well, I messaged her that when I was coming out, and I love her to pieces, but she does not do Facebook. And she just doesn't. And I messaged her to say, how much would it cost me to get you for a week just to teach me everything that's in your brain? And bless her, she didn't even get the message. It was so lovely.
Oh.
But when I saw her,
she's going to be at festival for a whole week.
So what was so funny is when I arrived at the Cape Festival 2 years ago, I was doing the check-in and we were getting everybody's name tags ready and we had everybody's name out and we were doing it. And then I picked up Pamela Stallebras. I'm like, she's my friend. When she's here, you call me immediately. I don't care. Find me. And I chased her down a corridor. She just arrived and there's this mad Englishman going screaming down the corridor.
She must have been delighted.
And if anybody hasn't looked her up or doesn't know who she is, she does the most incredible indigo dyeing I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
She is, and when you talk to her, she is so inspiring and she is so amazing.
And she's so generous because I learned everything I know about color and indigo dyeing, and I teach that now. And with her permission, and she was, so gracious.
She's amazing.
She's been so encouraging. She's just delightful.
You see, for me, she is the epitome of what I think South African quilters are. It's just so giving and so sharing of their character and their designs and their passion. They just want more and more people to do it.
Yeah, she's wonderful. So,
and I won't deny the only regret I have about this project is she didn't do a quilt. So if you speak to her and you see her,
I'll try and encourage her to bring.
No, not encourage, beg. Tell her I will.
I've not seen what I love. I think the miniature thing might be I don't know, but I'm sure she's got plenty of stuff.
All I know is that of all the people who in the South Africa I really, really wanted to have a piece of, she was one of them.
Oh, all right, I'll beg her. I'll phone her up.
And I don't mind that she doesn't. She is a busy lady and she is living her life. The last time I spoke to her at festival, she was telling me was it Brazil or Argentina?
Well, they go to Peru and Brazil. Usually Peru.
But she'd taken her van over. And how long did she spend there? It was like 7 months, 6-7 months going around Peru. No wonder she doesn't go on Facebook. She hasn't got
And they go into the Karoo and they go up the west coast to Namibia and they've been all over. And I know she's going to the Wool Festival in the middle of the Cape. I think that's happening soon in June. Yeah, I think they're combining that. Because I was at the Rhodes Fibre Fair and I said to her, don't you want to join me here? And she said, we can't do 3 trips in a year. It's too much.
She wants to do 3 trips in a year. Don't get her wrong.
Yeah.
No, but it is. And that's what I love about it is because I met her here at the festival and I just love the quilting community because the different people you meet at different times. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell me, what is the worst project you've ever worked on?
Oh, yes, I had to think about that and then I remembered it. My sister-in-law, way back in 1984, she was trying to be supportive and she knew I needed money and I was sewing for a living. And she said, would I make her a quilt? And my ears pricked up and I said, oh, I'd love to. And then she sent me all this silky satiny fabric and I had to do a diagonal comforter with that puffy batting. I nearly died and it was all on the diagonal. So it was all on the bias. It killed me. And I just I did it, but I hated every second of it.
Did she like it?
I have no idea. She said she did.
Take her at her word. Take her at her word. So I think that's a good segue into what would you tell new quilters other than not to sew on the bias with satin?
Work with cotton fabric. And don't spend a lot of money when you start out. My advice would be to go to the op shops or the charity shops, buy up beautiful old soft cotton shirts. You can get more than a fat quarter out of a man's shirt. And you can make the most beautiful things without having to break the bank. And then when you're getting better and you have a birthday coming up, ask someone to buy you some Cape Facet.
Good plan.
Yeah.
So I did that with my husband's shirts. He loves shirts. So we have this amazing collection of shirts, and he had
lovely.
about 110 that were just either not the right size anymore or worn out. Because the thing with men's shirts, the collars go and you get that shiny corner bit, and they've been around for years. So I then took them and I cut 6.5-inch squares out of the front and the back. So I got 7 of those. And then I cut hexagons out of the sleeves, the pockets, and everything. There's 3 meters of fabric in a shirt. You get a lot out of a shirt. And it's good cotton. The only things that have gone sometimes are the collars.
Yeah. And in South Africa with the exchange rate, it's becoming prohibitively expensive for young people to start out with quilting. My daughter's a young quilter and she goes to the new to you table because there's always markdowns there because she can't afford to buy 200 or 300 rand a meter or 500 rand a meter pieces of cloth that she loves. And she's been using old clothes and she's making beautiful things.
Well,
and it's just encouraging. Yeah. And you pick them up for next to nothing.
And it is, you can pick up a shirt because here, for example, you can go to a charity shop for an old shirt, which is really 100% cotton, really good value. You're paying £2-3 for the shirt.
Oh,
and there's 2-3 meters of fabric in there.
Exactly, yes. So, yeah, that's my advice for young quilters. Yeah.
What do you wish somebody had told you when you started out quilting?
To use wool batting. I'm using it now. It's very difficult to come by. I don't know why, because South Africa exports wool. But wool batting, I have discovered, because I do a lot of hand quilting, I love handwork, because my husband loves watching TV and I can find nothing more boring. So, and he's deaf, so he puts the subtitles on and the sound off, which is great. So I can listen to an audiobook while he's watching his TV happily, and I sit and I hand quilt, and I love it. And wool batting just drapes beautifully. It doesn't make me hot while I'm sitting with it on my lap, as a synthetic one does. It drapes better, and it's not as heavy as cotton batting. I mean, a really big quilt. I mean, I made us a king size one in COVID, and it was jolly heavy, but just the cotton top alone. And then I thought, I'm definitely going to use wool batting. And it was a lot easier to hand quilt that. And I love it. I really love it. But I just wish I could access it, because you kind of have to wait for ages before some comes in from wherever. I don't know. You'd think we'd produce it locally.
Well, I struggle to get it here as well. But there's a batting that I've found that is my favorite batting. My only flaw with it is it's 150 wide, so it's 60 inches wide.
Yeah.
But it's a soy cotton mix.
Oh, that sounds nice.
And the drape on it is exceptional. Bleaselina and Bloomberg have made it. And it's
nice. And it's not so heavy.
Really, really stunning quilt.
Because I find the real cotton one, I can't actually I can't wash them in my machine. They're too heavy, then the machine won't spin. And I really balk at paying for a quilt to be laundered.
No, I get you there. There are things you want to spend your money on.
Exactly.
So Angie, tell me, why did you join this Festival of Cloth series?
I love the idea of group work, particularly. I mean, I do a lot of collaborative work, and I just think South African quilters need to see each other's work on a scale which is easy to pick up. You know, if you go on a traveling exhibition and you can actually see all of these quilts in one space, then you can really see the different styles. You know, you look at one and you see it's Marilyn Pretorius immediately, and the other one's Elaine Barnard, and you can see them. I mean,
And
that's just so exciting.
all of
Tilly
these
de Harder,
amazing
I've got
images.
2 of her pieces. They are fabulous.
She's
I just
amazing.
love her. She's incredible. Yeah, yeah. So I just think it's a lovely idea to have a collection that showcases South African quilters. I mean, it's like an archival collection. This is a genius idea of yours.
Well, thank you. Because
Yeah.
for me, the quilts are amazing, and I'm so proud of the quilts, and I'm terrified of how I'm going to lay them out. So 230 odd quilts laid out in a block, getting them in the correct order. Bear with, caller. But for me, I think the most important bit is, as you know, being South African, most of our history is oral history. It's
Exactly.
not written down. And because the culture of tribal culture is you tell people the story and they listen and then tell
Yeah.
the story on. And for me,
Mm.
the oral history of learning about the quilter, it's amazing. And I think that for me is the privilege of this, is being able to get people trusting enough of their stories to put them in my
Yeah.
hand to be able to tell their story. And I think that's just, it's a
That
really
is
big.
very precious, John. And thank you for saying that, because that was actually the theme of my quilt. Because it bothers me hugely that there's not enough ethnic representation among the quilters in South Africa. And so when I did my quilt, I wanted to bring in local. So you'll see that the fabrics I used are either dyed by me, printed by me, or they are made by Degama, which is our local Eastern Cape Shweshwe producers. And they produce Shweshwe worldwide. And that's our only real Eastern Cape export that is really visually beautiful and we can be extremely proud of. So yeah, I really wanted to use those to show all these voices. As you said, the voices in cloth. Immediately, I thought the voices, the local voices, this is what we hear around us all the time, are the isiXhosa people who have this amazing way of speaking and singing. It's very lyrical. And when you think they have a particular type of call and response singing, which is spontaneous. So someone will start a line and then someone will respond, and eventually it grows. And this is what Sia Kolisi is doing with the rugby. And it's called Igwijo. And so those 3 images of the people dancing and singing on my quilt, that is about the call and response and the drummer in the background. Because again, the drum releases endorphins. You know, drumming is very, very good for a body and soul. And yeah, I just wanted to say that because, you know, we have 12 official languages, but there's probably about 35, 40 languages spoken in South Africa. And those 12 official ones, you know, English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, Pedi, Swana, Venda, Ndebele. I can't remember all of the 12, but and the 12th one was added last year, which is sign language. So, you know, the ladies waving her arms is actually supposed to be representing, you know, signing as well as singing as well as speaking. So I just wanted to literally represent the voices. Yeah.
And that's what's so special. And this is why I think these interviews are so important, because you telling that story gives the person who's looking at it a much more in-depth understanding of what it is that you've made. And I think sometimes we all look at quilts, we all see the little blurb on the side and we read it if it's not too long, and you miss so much more of the story when you don't know your heart, basically. What have you called your piece?
I called it Nkosi Sikelele Africa because, yeah, that's our national anthem. And it has got 5 languages in it. And obviously it's so special because it comes from the Eastern Cape too. It was written in the Eastern Cape. And that's where Nelson Mandela comes from. And that's where our Shweshwe comes from. And that's where I come from. And I feel very much part of the whole ethos of the place. And I want to kind of showcase that.
But I think it's very it's very South African to feel so patriotic.
Yeah, I
And I
think
think
so. I
you were
think because
incredibly,
we've come through a lot, it's made us feel we need to say something about who we are, because we always feel like we have to apologize for who we've been. So we're trying to grow something different here, and it's not easy, especially when people talk about cultural appropriation. I was walking through the town wearing my shweshwe skirt, and somebody accosted me and said, "Do you know that this is cultural appropriation?" And I said, "No, I do know that you think that, but actually it originally comes from Germany, and it's a fusion. It's not an appropriation." And we had this conversation, and I think it's important to have these conversations about culture and where we get our ideas from and where we place our emphasis. So, yeah, that's important.
but I think what you've just said actually is the heart of actually changing anything,
Mm,
because let's not minimize that cultural appropriation happens every day, and it's by people benefiting off the lives of, it's unacceptable. But I think
yes.
that when you have that conversation with somebody who feels that way and you explain your motivation, and I think it comes from intent as to what it is you want to do with it, by having
Mm,
that conversation, you change the narrative and you change that person's feeling. And hopefully they understand where you're coming from. And if not, you've at least explained it as best you can. And I think
yeah.
that South Africans, because I was very young during apartheid. By the time I was in high school, apartheid had been abolished. We had I never had mixed classes in my year, but 2 years below us, they were getting everybody in from standard 6, standard 7 to be able to make sure education levels were the same all across the board. So for me,
Mm,
I had a very unpleasant apartheid education for the first sort of
mm,
2/3 of my career, my school career, and
yeah.
all of that changed in my high school career because I went to a much more forward-thinking school. I went to a much more liberal school, and it was really lovely to have that as an end to my school career. But I think anybody who grew up in South Africa during apartheid era, you can't deny there is a lot
Mm,
we, as a culture, just by being white, whether you do agree with apartheid or not, you do have a lot to apologize for because
yes,
there's a perception.
absolutely.
And I think it's important to have had those apologies. And like that, I think one of the most
Mm,
interesting things for our country was the Truth and Reconciliation.
absolutely. 100%.
And I
Yeah. It's so
remember
important.
Desmond Tutu in tears, in absolute uncontrollable tears, hearing testimony from victims. And I think that what happened, what I was probably second year of high school, or second year of, it was probably my last year of high school. And I just remember thinking, I don't understand, because I think a lot of people don't understand. They don't see the atrocities that were inflicted on people.
Mm,
And I think that being able to apologize for that is really important, but
yeah.
also then being able to move on with an
Move
understanding.
on, and also reparation, which is still
Absolutely.
ongoing and has to be.
But
And
and the reparation conversation I know is a massive trigger for a lot of people, and I don't
mm,
profess to know enough about it. But I don't believe that there is any amount of money that can make better that.
no,
It's
it
not.
can't.
You
No,
can't.
there
And if
isn't.
you look
You
in
can't.
look at Native Americans whose land was, the greatest nation in the entire world, there's a lot of reparation owed there as well. But
Huge.
it's never going to happen, and it's never going
Mm,
to make those cultures whole again. How on earth do
yeah.
you apologize for wiping out a nation? You just can't.
No. Same
And
thing in
it's
Canada, but at least I see. I don't know if you've come across quilts for survivors in Canada.
no,
So wonderful. I picked it up on Quilt on Fire podcast, Brandy Maslowski, and she interviewed them, and it was fantastic. It's an amazing project where they started making, because the survivors of the schools, they started making quilts, and it's actually a survivor's granddaughter who started this project, and it's coming on board, and more Canadian quilters are now coming on board and making quilts for survivors. Some survivors don't even want a quilt. Others are overwhelmed when they get given a quilt because it's a kind of a feeling of being hugged, being wrapped, being kept secure, which as children was ripped from them when they were taken from their families. So, there's so many ethnic people around the world who've been so abused over centuries. And yeah, the fact that quilting can play a role,
I know.
it's either telling the stories or focusing or including people or giving, there's always a forum for putting it out there.
Very much. And I think one thing that I've become Because the one thing I love, the South African philosophy of diaspora, the one thing I find extraordinary is having lived abroad for 23 years, you learn a different. I've lived more in the UK now than I ever did in South Africa. I'm almost at the cusp of being more in the UK than ever living in Africa. And that's
Gosh,
astonishing for me. That really, I'm
yeah,
like, I can't lose that.
that's
But
why
I
you
think
keep
what's,
coming back.
well, it's hard. It's really hard because you build a life wherever you live, and
Yeah,
giving that up is
that's right.
hard. But I think to myself, the one thing I've learned in this country, living here, is when you have a nation that has education, healthcare, food,
Mm,
accommodation, however good, bad, whatever people think it is, you are looked after in this country.
absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
think that comes at an enormous cost to the country as a nation, to taxpayers, it comes at a cost. But I think once you have that recognition of the privilege that you live in, that you do have money for food, you do have money for accommodation, you do have money for clothes, you can educate your children. When you come from that privilege and you recognize that just by me being educated with an university degree, you're in the top 1% of a
I
nation.
know, scary, huh?
You
Wow.
know, the fact that you've got food on your plate, you've got food in your mouth every single meal puts you above so many people on the planet. You then adjust your thinking on how it is people react to that. I can't find the right words
Mm,
to be articulate on it. But having lived in the UK, my diaspora lesson has been experiencing that. And one of my best friends, we have dinner every time I go over. We've been friends for 30 years. She's amazing. I adore her. And what I love about being in the LGBT community is she is she feels safe asking me questions. I don't profess to know the answers to the question. I remember going to the dinner table with her one night and she says, "Tell me about gender, transsexual people. Why?" And I said, "I'm going to stop you completely. Don't finish that sentence. And I'm going to say to you quite simply, it costs you nothing to say he or her when he
exactly.
or her have asked for that. It
Yes,
costs you
exactly.
nothing,
Nothing. Yeah.
but it gives them a place,
Recognition.
a
Mm.
voice, and they feel heard. Why
Yeah,
would you not?"
exactly. Be inclusive.
Exactly. And I think that that's
Inclusivity.
something living abroad and being so exposed to so much that because of the issues in South Africa, accommodation, food, unemployment, people literally just being able to eat, let alone
Mm,
running water, let's, just get food. I'm able to have a different conversation about it because of that
mm,
diaspora and that privilege. And you can't have any of these conversations without recognizing your privilege.
mm. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
And we started talking about a quilting piece.
Yeah. But it's to be sensitive and open always, I think, and inclusive. Because when you start, polarizing and saying this or that, then no, then the problems start when some lives matter more than others. Yeah, yeah,
It's hard. It's a very hard situation.
it is. It
I'm
is.
going to switch this back to quilting, and I'm going to ask, have you ever made yourself a quilt?
Yes, I think about the third quilt I ever made. I made for my then husband in 1983 as a wedding present for us. And then I followed it up with another one, which we couldn't decide whether we wanted the one or the other. And then both got stolen.
Oh,
It was heartbreaking. So then I said, no, I'm not going to all this troublemaking stuff and it gets stolen. So I never bothered. But then in COVID, I was turning 60 in lockdown, in hard lockdown. So no party, which made me very happy, and no fuss. So I thought, what would I really like? Actually, maybe I should make myself a quilt. So I
good.
made us, my new husband and me, I made us a king size quilt, the one I was telling you about with the wool batting, and I love it. I dyed the back and I love it. And it's a beautiful lightweight quilt that's on our bed. Because when you've got a king quilt and it's heavy, your feet start getting sore in the night because of the drag. I don't like that. I must sleep under my quilt.
What do you think is the best way for us to encourage new people to start quilting?
I really do think collaborative quilting is the answer. Way back in the early 80s, I was making collaborative quilts as wedding presents. A friend got married in America, and how do you send a gift over? So you get a whole bunch of friends around and you say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Here are these squares of fabric. You go away, do something on it, draw, paint, whatever, and bring it back. And then a wonderful lady who actually started the guild in Port Elizabeth, Jenny Whitehead, who's since deceased, she had one of those old quilting frames that you see in all those old American photographs with two trestles at each end and two sort of planks. And then you drape the quilt over it and you literally sit and hand quilt. And we'd get 6 to 8 people on a side, and we'd have a morning and we'd have tea and cake, and everyone would sit and hand quilt. And these were people who hadn't picked up a needle in their lives. And by the end of it, we had a whole bunch of new quilters involved, because it's not so intimidating. You've got people holding your hand and you're enjoying the process. And to me, that's how quilting originated. And I really feel with the way we're going now, with everybody buying their own stash and doing their own thing and wanting to be better than everybody else, we've lost that. And I'm still rooting for that, because I think that is what encourages the new quilters. And my own daughter, bringing her along and saying, come, we're going to go and do this. And at first she sort of almost came reluctantly, and then once she was there with all of the ladies encouraging her, and men encouraging her and saying, come on, why don't you come and sit with me and help me with this? And then gradually bringing them in. I have a friend, a very dear friend, whose grandchildren are busy making a quilt as we speak for their mum's 40th birthday next month. And they don't know, and she doesn't know about it. So Granny is having the children over and they're busy stitching a quilt for their mum. So that is how you encourage new quilters for me.
So what's next on your quilting journey?
To break some rules, the quilt police rules.
Oh, I like it. You've got me 100% on board.
I'm so irritated because I wanted to enter my wedding dress for the exhibition, but it has to be 3 layers and quilted 50%, otherwise they won't allow it. And to me, those kind of restrictions is what puts people off quilting, and why we aren't getting new quilters, because people look at it and go, oh my goodness, no, I can't do these rules and regulations, and if the points aren't perfect, then blah blah. No, just say, bring it on.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. There is.
Yeah. And I think what I really want to do is start facilitating a collaborative quilt in an ethnic community. I work a lot with the Kaiskama Art Project. I don't know if you've come across them. They are embroiderers, and they have done massive pieces that go all around the world, altarpieces and huge. They've just finished a massive piece for climate change in sort of 8 meters by 4 meters, massive tapestries. But they do that, they make their money out of that. But I just think for themselves to do quilts for their homes, etc. But again, they live in Hamburg, which is off the beaten track. They don't have access to stuff. When we were doing the planning for this Umlibo quilt, which was the climate change one, which was showcased at COP24, yes, this year in Dubai. I was working with waste with them. So I planned a whole week's workshops on using waste to create paper cloth, or to create plastic cloth, or to create beads out of waste. And they said to me, can you please bring us waste? They didn't have waste, not much waste in their community, because they're not sort of commercially, they don't live in a city. So there's not a lot of waste in the area. And that for me was very interesting. So, to take them clothing, old clothing, scraps, people who de-stashing, to take them stuff and get them patchworking and quilting in their spare time when they're not embroidering for money, would probably be a good project I'd love to do.
And I love the fact that you're so inspired by it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah.
Have you got anything that you'd like to say that we haven't said?
I think I'd like to see a lot more men quilters. We have 2 in our guild of nearly 180 women. It's 2 men. It's not enough. When we did our collaborative quilts in the 80s, I can show you some photographs. It was half men and half women. And these were guys who'd come out the army. We handed them a needle and said, come, sit. This is what you do. And they did. And where are they now? Where are they now? Yeah, and the same thing at school. I think what worries me is they've taken all handwork out of schools, which is very sad because children learn mathematics, architecture, design, engineering through simple working with your hands, planning something like a quilt. And it's just not available anymore to kids.
So I have a philosophy in that I believe a lot of the isolation that younger kids feel these days, and I believe that one of the things that has changed is art's been taken out of school, making things with hands been taken out of school, and I think compounded by the issues that kids face as well. I definitely know that for myself, I had a lot. I'm not handy, okay? I am crafty, but I'm not handy. And I remember going and in my standard 6, standard 7, so I was 12, 13 years old, we had a woodworking class and we had to make a tray. I still have that tray. It has traveled with me to America when I lived in America. I have it here. No one's allowed to touch it. You don't put it, it is a decoration, but I still have that tray. But I worked so hard on that tray. It's dire. You'll get splinters just by looking at it. But I think that
but it builds self-pride, doesn't it?
the pride you
An
feel is
identity.
important.
Yeah.
And I
Your
think
whole
that's missing
identity.
in a lot of our lives at the moment. And that's
Yeah.
for me, I think it's a sad loss for our community, our world, to losing people.
And that's why I think the Japanese are so far ahead of us, because if you go there, you'll see all the children are busy working with their hands.
Exactly.
Even cleaning, down to cleaning their own classrooms. I mean, they work with their hands.
They do.
And it's not, there's no stigma attached to it. It's your pride.
But it's more than the pride and the accomplishment. You can't take that away.
Yeah, and it's responsibility too to community. You know, when you think about it, I mean, littering, if you bend down and pick something up with your hands and throw it away, it starts with that. Just looking after yourself and your space and having sort of some self-worth.
And it is that self-worth is something that's really, it's something you need, and you don't realize you need it until it's
yeah,
too
and it kind of embeds it intuitively, that you don't even realize it's happening. But if everything's done for you and you're just handed a device to play on all day, you don't develop that.
And you don't. Angie, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you and learn more about you. And I can't wait to meet you for a gin and tonic in Pietermaritzburg.
Absolutely, and a big hug once my ribs
and
are
it's
broken.
the blue tonic water by, I can't remember the brand, but the blue tonic water is mine.
I remember that one.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back again next time. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Angie Weisswanger from Quebec, which is formerly known as Port Elizabeth. And I entered this little piece entitled Nkosi Sikelele Africa. And it is to celebrate all 12 official languages, and especially the Eastern Cape, with the scenery and the local fabrics, which I've hand dyed, and the shweshwe, which is very proudly Eastern Cape, and the Xhosa singers, the Igwijo style of singing, call and response, which is very inclusive.